change forces us to kill a part of ourselves, a piece of who we used to be. Yet, change is also important for us to grow and live out our lives. So in order to grow, what has to happen? Well, a piece of us has to die along with that growth, neurologically, in our brain, right? So a connection has to be made, and a piece of us that stuck with us and didn't let us move on. We have to recognize that, kill a part of that off, and then now our brain grows. And so, why is this? Why is this what we're talking about? Well, if we want to change, we have to be comfortable with doing that. The only thing is, as people, we like to be comfortable. And my biggest thing is being comfortable. And that's kind of how I live, especially through EMT. Like, that's what I want, because holy crap, it makes me, and I've said this plenty of times now, it makes me really uncomfortable. Right? The thing is, since we prefer being comfortable much more than uncomfortable, and it depends on the person, but naturally we want to just be comfortable, and a lot of us get stuck in that place. So, that makes sense, because our brain is wired for survival, and survival comes with predictability. The more we can predict a situation, the more comfortable we are in it, which means the more unpredictable it is, it's also when we become more skittish and like, oh, should I run away? Should I not do this? And especially the more important it is to you, that situation, it becomes even more scary. And so, makes sense. Our brain is wired for survival. We don't want anything that we can't predict, and we stay in that comfort zone, which is where the growth term that I used a second ago, learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable, comes from. And in a way, what does that mean? Well, if I go into an uncomfortable situation, and we can use EMT for example, then I either grow or I shrivel up and just like metaphorically die, right? So I go into these situations, especially the first time, and I'm really, really uncomfortable, really nervous. I freeze up. I'm like, oh crap. And then in my brain, I'm like, I can't afford to do this again. And so I change. And then the next time is better. And so I have learned to internally chase those moments where I am uncomfortable, because I know it messes me up, and I know it forces me to grow. And I say mess me up, I mean like I folded under pressure, right, in that specific case. And there's other cases too. If you want to think back to, when we're all kids and our parents are like, yeah, let's go here, we're going to go here, we're going to have a fun time. And you're like, no, I don't want to go there. Or you start stomping around, making a fit, that stuff. But when you go there, you have a good time. You finally get out of your feelings, you're in your feelings. You wanted to stay at home on the video games, or you wanted to go play with your dolls. Yet when you get there, after like 5-10 minutes, you're over being angry, and you're like, oh, I'm having fun, and you're in the moment, you're doing your thing, you're a child, right? Well, you leave that experience, and all of a sudden, you're happy. And so, at first, it was uncomfortable, you didn't want to do it, it was new. And then you go into that situation, and you're like, aha, I'm having fun. But you couldn't predict the outcome, right? Because you're a kid. Our brains only go so far, even now. Imagine what being a kid was like, right? And so we're looking at this, and we grew from it. We had fun. The kid example, right? You had fun. And so I want to tell you a story about a significant event that happened to me, I think like a couple of years ago, where a big shift happened for me mentally. Maybe kind of, and in a similar way to the Uber story, like killing my pride, but this is more of a psychological safety thing. And it switched my perspective. And I feel like this is probably one of the best stories that I have for getting that point across of when you change, you have to kill a part of yourself that maybe you don't need to hold on to anymore. Right. And I promise I'm not crying or getting sniffly. My nose is just ready. So, I'll take you back to a couple years ago. I had just gotten out of probably my longest relationship to date. And I had just ended that. I had no idea what I was doing anymore. I was alone. I felt alone, right? I had friends, but ultimately I was alone. And then I started doing college and working 2 jobs, one being my business. So I was just going through the motions and doing my own thing. And so on my way home one day, I was thinking, and I was like, what's going on? Why do I feel this way? And to put these feelings in perspective, I felt lost and hopeless, and I felt like there was nothing that was really gonna go on for me. So I was telling myself, I need to figure out a way to get to the bottom of this and figure out why I'm feeling this way. And that's kind of how I've always observed things in my own perspective, is how can I get to the bottom of this? So I got home, and lo and behold, I actually at this time avoided confronting myself, and I drowned in my thoughts out with a lot of music. And I think I still do that today every now and then, but I try and quieten it out. But I think that's what a lot of us do, is we quieten out the voices in our head, in our own voices, with so much music that it just gets diluted, and that we can't process our thoughts effectively in some cases. And that's a side point. That's a little side rant. But long story short, at this time, there have been times before where I lost my headphones and I could no longer listen to music. So I was forced to just sit with my thoughts. And this time I was willing to just sit and go through my thoughts by myself. And so what I did is, when I got home, I took all my electronics that I carry around with me, so basically my phone and my headphones, whatever, put them on the table, grabbed my keys, just in case I locked myself out, grabbed my keys, go outside, and I literally went to the dirt, pavement, whatever you want to call it, and I just sat there. That's it. I sat there, and I sat with my thoughts. And let me tell you, the first 30 minutes, I thought it was completely useless. I thought so. And I was just I was rambling in my head, right? And I was kind of getting to the point where I was like, this is kind of useless. What am I doing? But it was also kind of peaceful. So I sat there. And I sat there long. I told myself I was going to sit there until something happened, until I felt better, until something in my mind clicked and I was able to shift my perspective to be able to do something. And I didn't think of it as sophistically as I just mentioned it, but ultimately I needed something to change. That's what I was looking for. So 30 minutes go by and nothing happens. And then all of a sudden I started singing. There was some melody stuck in my head, and I can't name it exactly, but it was some EDM song. And so I just started talking, or singing, sorry. And I was just singing a melody tune over and over again, but I was putting different words to each verse. I was basically singing my own song. And all of a sudden, a string of words came out. And that string of words was, I don't feel safe. Obviously, it was in a tune. I'm not going to sing in front of a camera because that's weird. That's scary. I'm not that comfortable yet. Maybe one day. But that's what I said. I said, I don't feel safe. And immediately, I started bawling and crying. And in my mind, I'm like, there's no way that just happened. Because in my head, I've always told myself, I feel safe. I'm safe. I can take care of myself. And this was 2 years ago, so I was like, what, 19? Or 20? I think I was 20. Maybe just turning 21. So maybe not even 2 years ago. But that happened, and in my mind, there was no way that I didn't feel safe. But I wasn't thinking about it from a psychological perspective. I was thinking of it from a physical perspective. Physically, I've always felt safe. I always felt like no one's really going to mess with me, and if you leave me alone, I'll leave you alone, that kind of stuff. And even being 21, I was still like, what, 170, 175. So, wasn't super crazy, but I felt like I could handle myself. I was hitting on the bag, whatever. And in my mind, I probably took a second. Psychologically, I didn't feel safe. And that's ultimately why I started crying. This part of myself I had realized that I had been fooling myself this whole time and convincing myself that I had been safe and that there was nothing wrong with how I was living my life, right? And part of it was, because I had recently got out of a relationship, so I wasn't really talking to anyone. I was staying to myself. I refused to go drinking. I refused to use other coping mechanisms, so this is what I chose. I was like, I'm going to sit with my thoughts, figure this out. And so now this new perspective was in my head, and I was like, now you're telling me I don't feel safe? Like, what? What am I doing? And after I was done crying, I cried for probably like 15, 20, 30 minutes, something like that. Something changed. That part of me that believed that I was always safe, I had finally calmed down enough, and that part of me has gone. And now this new piece of me, this childlike, wanting to be loved part of me, came out and just wanted, and I'll put this in the simplest way that I can, just wanted someone to hold me while I fell apart. And it was a really emotional moment for me. And I haven't really felt that way since, I guess. I mean, maybe I've had glimpses, but to be able to be a man and fall apart like that, like I never really felt like I could do that safely with someone before, or at least to the best of my knowledge. And maybe there was glimpses before, but I didn't really grow up with parents. I was in foster care. I don't remember much of my childhood any. And then, of course, my growing up, like adolescence, kind of was tossed away. I wasn't able to do much. And so this thought just sat with me. And I was like, dang, I really just don't feel safe. And not in the sense of physically, but mentally. I just didn't feel like there was someone to catch me if everything in my life had fallen apart. And that was really devastating feeling, actually. But it changed me, and it put me on the path that I am today. And that's, I don't want anyone to feel like they have to go through that. And this is part of one of my deep drivers. And I haven't really thought about this story a lot recently, until like a day ago. And so this experience, it shifted my perspective. It killed off the part of me that maybe thought I was safe. And I had this new thought, this new emotion behind safety. And albeit, like, on the outside looking in, I'm sure it looks really small. And it's like, oh, well, it's just a simple phrasing of words. But the simple changings of meanings that you put behind the words, and even words themselves, they make a big difference. And, I mean, they've changed my life. They've changed other people's lives. It's insane. And so that's just my story on how I changed, on something that's significantly impacted me, on the way that I have killed some part of me off and changed. And yeah, I could have used something with EMT, but not everyone can relate to something EMT related, right? Or paramedic related or health field related. Everyone's been in some sort of relationship, so this was just an intimate one. You have friendships, you have family. And this one was a really big one for me. And I actually hope to never forget it. So this is going to stay with me for a long time. But it is good to kill off parts of ourselves in order to grow. It's very, very important. And yes, it causes you to be uncomfortable, but we're not in the survival age anymore, which means we're probably not going to die if we chase something that makes us uncomfortable. And then just another one off. If something makes you uncomfortable, or if the thought of something makes you uncomfortable, the thought of doing something makes you uncomfortable, you probably should do it. Because that means it has a significant value in your life if it goes wrong. But odds are, and there's some sort of, I forget what law it is, but our brain makes things 10 times worse than they actually are. Which means if you do it, it's not going to be that bad. It's not going to be as bad as you think it is. It's also not going to go as good as you think it is, but it's not as bad as you think it's going to happen. And unless it's like standoff, you got the guns, you got all that stuff, then, maybe. But when it comes to like personal communication skills, doing a new job, you're going to feel like an imposter. The last 2 weeks I felt like an imposter being an EMT, but now I'm finally getting into it to where I'm like, oh, I'm helping these people actually, stay alive, get to where they need to go. It's a different shift, and it takes a second, but eventually you fit into that role. And that's how everyone starts. You always feel like an imposter at first, but then you grow. You do it, you drink the water, and you just get on with it, right? And so, I challenge you, what things recently have you been forced to change? And what parts of yourself did you kill off? Did you have to kill off? What new perspectives and old perspectives did you have to change? And share them. Like if you're able to comment, just share them. Like what things have you changed in your life and improved in your life? But that's gonna do it for this one.